today we're going to be learning about two different types of cells, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. And yes, I am aware those are long words, and hopefully they vaguely ring a bell from freshman bio. And so we're going to go through each type and explain what makes them different, okay? So prokaryotic cells are found in organisms that we refer to as prokaryotes. Okay, so this is just like kind of an umbrella term. And the organisms that fall in the prokaryotic kind of classification would be bacteria and archaea. Bacteria, I'm sure you all are familiar with, right? Things like strep throat, that's a bacteria you can get that makes you sick. E. coli, right? You can get that from food, that can make you sick. One thing to note, though, is that not all bacteria is bad for you, okay? We use bacteria to help us make like cheese and yogurt. You all right now have a lot of bacteria living in your digestive system, and that's a good thing because it helps us break down our food, okay? So that's bacteria. What about archaea? You might not have heard of archaea very much, but basically archaea, think archaic. These things are super, super primitive. So like if we look at those organisms living in deep sea vents that are very, very, one of the oldest living forms on Earth, those are from this category called archaea, okay? So that's what makes up the prokaryotic kind of classification there. And one thing to note is that all prokaryotes are unicellular. So they are all just one cell big, which means they are teeny tiny. You're going to need a microscope to see them, okay? Like a super high-powered microscope in a lot of cases. Now let's look at some of the defining features of a prokaryotic cell. All prokaryotes, because they're unicellular, they need a nice stiff surrounding to keep them safe from their environment. So they all have a cell wall, okay? And right inside of that, they have a plasma membrane. One of the main other things about them is they have no nucleus, okay? They have a region where the DNA is, which is called the nucleoid, but it's not a nucleus. It's not enclosed in a membrane. It's not separate from the rest of the cell. It's just jumbled in there with the cytoplasm, but it's where the chromosome is clumped, okay? And in fact, instead of having a bunch of chromosomes, prokaryotes have one chromosome, and it's typically in a circle. So one circle chromosome, okay? So other than your cell wall and your membrane and one long chromosome that's kind of all jumbled up like spaghetti, you also have some ribosomes in there. And then your prokaryotic cell is going to need a way to get around because it's only one cell big. It's got to be able to move. And so it can either have those little tail-like things that are called flagella, or sometimes it's got little more like hair-like things on the side that are called cilia. And then some prokaryotes, not all, but this picture does, have what's called fimbriae. And that is basically a way where they can like attach and kind of grab onto other things. Okay, so that's the basic layout of a prokaryotic cell. Now, what about a eukaryotic cell? This comes from eukaryotes. Eukaryotes, just like prokaryote was a term used to describe a group of organisms, same thing with eukaryote, okay? These are going to be things like protists, fungi, animals, and plants. Fungi, you're probably familiar with fungus, things like mushrooms, okay? Animals, I'm sure you're aware of animals. Plants, I hope you're aware of plants. So of course we've got our plant and our animal cells over here, but also eukaryotes include protists. So what's a protist? These are going to be really more simple things, but more complex than a prokaryote. So things like amoeba, things like algae, if you ever heard of paramecium. These are protists. So here's a nice little picture of an amoeba right there. They are one-celled, okay? They're unicellular, but they are eukaryotes, okay? And so eukaryotes can be multicellular like plants and animals and fungi, or they can be unicellular like protists. So what's the deal then? Like, why are these guys, these protists, these amoebas, algae, paramecium, why are they eukaryotes and not prokaryotes if they're unicellular? Well, here's going to be the thing. They do have a nucleus, okay? Their DNA is not going to be stored in circular chromosomes. It's probably going to be linear, and it's going to be enclosed in a nucleus, okay? The other thing is that they're going to have organelles. They're going to have lots of organelles that help them function, okay? So you've already learned about all these organelles that can be present. The amoeba might not have all of them, but it'll certainly have some of them, okay? They also have a cell membrane. Of course, only plant cells have a cell wall. And typically, eukaryotes are much, much bigger than prokaryotes because they're often multicellular. So if they're multicellular, obviously they're going to be a lot bigger in general than a prokaryote, which is unicellular. Okay? So I want you to think back now. What similarities do you see between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells? And I want you to pause the video and try to write down as many things you can come up with what do they have in common. When you're done, you can push play, and I'll let you know the list that I came up with. Here's what I came up with. They're both enclosed by a cell membrane. They have cytoplasm. They all have some kind of genetic info that is kind of clustered together somewhere. Both types of cells have ribosomes. Both types of cells can have a cell wall, okay? And both types of cells can have mobility features like cilia and flagella. Maybe you came up with some others. Those are the ones that I could come up with. So now let's think about what differences do you see between these type of cells. So I want you to take a minute, pause the video, write down as many differences as you can think of. All right, I hope you're ready. Here's what I could think of. I could think of the fact that there's no nucleus in prokaryotes. I could think of that in prokaryotes, they only have a single circular strand of DNA. And basically, prokaryotes have almost no organelles whatsoever, right? Like just a ribosome, and that's about it. And then, of course, the size. Prokaryotic cells are usually teeny, teeny, tiny, and eukaryotic cells are typically much, much, much bigger. Okay, so that's it. Pretty basic. Here's the overview of what you need to know, just the main general ideas. All right, and here is where we are in the textbook in case you want to check out more info there.